everyone. My name is Elena Martinez. I'm one of the artistic directors of the Bronx Music Heritage Center. Welcome to our June Percussion Discussion, part 2 of El Tambor Arabe. In a moment, we'll have Bobby Sanabria talk to you a little bit and discuss why it has that, the show has that name tonight. Before we start, though, I want to give a shout out to our funder. The Bronx Music Heritage Center program is supported in part by the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council on the Arts, with the support of the New York State Legislature, public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, the Lily Auchincloss Foundation, and the Loriam Tisch Illumination Fund. So tonight we have with us, we're very excited to have a really special guest with us, the great percussionist, Zafer Tawil. He was here a few months ago performing at a festival, and I'm so glad he's back here tonight with his quartet, the Untitled Quartet, and they're going to be talking a little bit about percussion from the Middle East. And Zafer Tawil is an accomplished musician and virtuoso on the oud, qanun, violin, and other Arabic percussion. He has worked on many collaborative projects, on soundtrack with Jonathan Demme, on jazz fusion projects, and on Persian and Indian classical music projects as well. He's an educator and taught at many different universities here in the United States and abroad. So before we get to him, I'm going to go to our other artistic director, Bobby Sanabria, to talk to you a little bit about the origins of the frame drum, which we're going to be talking about tonight. But sorry that if you came on a little bit early, we had some technical difficulties. We are on Facebook now. Please put any comments, any questions you have for any of the percussionists tonight in the Facebook thread, and we will, in the Facebook comment section, and we will get to them live and be able to ask the drummers some questions. So with that, Bobby Sanabria.
Hi everybody. Saludos amigos, como dice un bando la serie. Welcome everybody. My name is Bobby Sanabria, the other artistic director here at the Bronx Music Heritage Center. This is part 2 of our percussion discussion on El Tambor Arabe. This drum that I'm tapping out on is known in my ancestral homeland as a pandereta or pandero. When we play this drum, we play with 2 other drums. This one is the fundador, the lowest, then we have a middle drum known as the punto de clave, which is small in the middle, and the requinto, which is the highest pitch drum and talks with solos, and it is accompanied by a scraping instrument known as the cuicharo, made from a plant of actually a fruit called iguera, with notches cut into it. And what looks like an afro pick is scraped, so you have something like this. Anyway, as you can see, this is very important, so we can march in the streets with it. That's why the pleta, which is the rhythm that we utilize with this style of drum in Puerto Rico, is known as our musical newspaper. But this drum has deep roots going all the way back to the Middle East and North Africa. In fact, in the early 19th century, Puerto Ricans used to call this drum what? Tambor Arabe. And hence our 2-part percussion discussion on the roots of this and many other friend drums that you see in the different parts of Latin America. So tonight, to show you the connections between Egypt, Palestine, and other parts of the Middle East, we have Michael Burdi, again, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bobby Sanabria, the co-artistic director of the Bronx Music Heritage Center, and welcome to the second part of our two-part percussion discussion on the origins of frame drums. In the first installment last month, we talked a little bit about the Puerto Rican frame drum known as the pandereta, and other frame drums like the doof from Portugal, and other drums that come from different parts of North Africa and the Middle East, and of course in the Caribbean. Well, in this second part, we're focusing on the music of Egypt, Palestine, and Turkey. And we have some masters here led by Zafer Tawil, Maestro Sophia. I mispronounced his name, so I apologize, Maestro, when I introduced you. So, I introduced all of the members of your quartet, and each of them have very interesting backgrounds. We'll get into that. Ladies and gentlemen, remember that if you want to ask a question of these great grandmasters of these traditions, please put your questions in the chat. Elena will relay them to me. Elena Martinez, the other artistic director here at the BMHC, the Bronx Music Heritage Center, and we'll read them to them, and they will answer them for you in real time. All right, I'm going to start with Maestro Sophia. You have a very interesting background because you've played and worked on movie soundtracks, pop records, etc. First, tell us where you're originally from so the people that don't know you can learn a little bit about you and how you got into the tradition that you so beautifully represent.
Thank you, first of all, for having here, Bobby, and thanks the Bronx Music for having us here, and Elena. And my background, I was born in Palestine, Jerusalem, and growing up in Jerusalem, we had very challenging with with occupation and with all the political issues that we had with each other. As a Palestinian, it was hard. We didn't have educational infrastructure to teach for music, so we didn't have even instruments in schools or any musical education. So I was lucky that I fell in love with this instrument. I think you have a similar instrument to it, the lauto. Lauto, it's like oud. We have
laoud, yeah.
Laoud, yes. So we have this instrument like laoud. It's similar to mandolin, fretless instrument. It gives us the chance to play microtonal music on the oud. So I fell in love with this instrument. So I met my teacher, my guru. He was an older gentleman, and I started going. My brother knew him actually before, so I asked my brother to introduce me to him. Then my brother took me, and we met. His name is Mustafa, that's my teacher name. And so I get to this place, it smells like incense and coffee in Jerusalem, the old city. It smells so good. So I fell in love with the place from the first instinct. And then the instruments, and I became a member of this school, little school. He taught there with another two teachers from different cities in Palestine, Bethlehem and Ramallah. So I started going to help out with like events, making coffee to the teachers, and little by little I started playing first, like accompanying different musicians with the rig. And the rig, by the way, it's that instrument that have the things, we call this a rig. And it's the classical instrument that it used in the classical setting. Originally, it's made out of fish skin and wood and grass gills, we call. But the skin today, we use synthetic skin and plastic because of the weather and but still the fish skin is the original sound.
Right.
And so in the beginning, I started playing the rig with accompany different musicians, oud players. Then I started being curious about different instruments like the oud and the violin and the sitar, the kanun. This is how I started. Then I started traveling abroad to Budapest, Germany, and etc. Different cities in Europe, then the US, and I met my wife, and she's from here, so this is my residence house since 1999, and that's my story.
Oh, we're so glad that you're here teaching us these incredible traditions and sharing your musicianship with us and your culture. Tell us a little bit about the instrument that you were playing just now.
Yes, we actually played for you 4 dubbaks. So this the dubbak, it's an instrument, we call it have many names. In Lebanon, Syria, we call it Percussion. In Egypt, they call it Tabla. Tabla, in the other place they call it dubbak. So it has many names and it played in many different ways. And for example, North Africa, Morocco, they play lots of 6/8 on the dubbak. 6/8 rhythms, Bali rhythms. In Egypt, it's more like 4/4 and rhythms that combined with the threes, groups of threes and twos, could be 15, could be 9, could be 5, different rhythms. And we performed this piece, actually, our friend Nezih, he can talk a little more about it because he taught us this piece, Nezih. So it's, you want to talk a little about?
Yeah. Fantastic, yeah, Nezih. The instrument in and of itself, the dumbek, Maestro Sophia was mentioning that the instrument can be found in different countries. But what is its country of origin? Where did it first appear?
I believe it's ancient Mesopotamia, where it's all like it was developed in some form, and then over the time, it changed here and there forms, depending on also the country it was played in. And now in modern times, it just passes over from one country to the other.
Right.
Also through the Ottoman Empire, I think there was a lot of spreading of it to a lot of Africa and to the Balkans.
Wow.
Balkans, yeah.
Now, the instrument in and of itself, does it also use fish skin?
Yeah, so the original ones we have one right here. They're made out of ceramic, so clay, and fish or goat skin. So this one, I believe, is goat skin, right? Yeah. And they don't have really a tuning system, but nowadays they use light bulbs with a little dimmer, so you can heat it up if it's too humid, yeah, and it looks nice, it shines up. But originally they would heat it up with next to a fire or a lamp or that. And now the modern ones have like just a Allen wrench tuning system.
I mean, the piece we just played was composed by Nezih. That's why I best the microphone.
When you play this instrument in its natural state, are there ones of various sizes, like in the Cuban musical tradition, the Dominican, Puerto Rican, Brazilian tradition, drums of different sizes with different names? It might be 3 congas in the rumba tradition, but each one has a specific function. Is it the same with this tradition as well? Yeah,
you have different sizes. Like this is like a bigger size. It's a tohola, right? Is it a tohola? Yeah. We have these are just like tabla or darbukas, and some. Is this a sombati? This is a little bigger. So it's just different range.
Do they have different names when you use them in a trio like that?
Yeah. So this is a sombati. Is it Egyptian? I believe it's Egyptian. This would be a tabla in Egypt.
And this is the sombati because of the size. It's bigger.
I see, okay.
And this is the baki or the tabla because it's the normal size. And now we have that size, and there's even bigger.
Wow.
One. Yeah, like the whole, but this is considered the whole kind of in a way.
I've never seen a very, very large one. So that must be, does it look like? Does it look like the size of a djembe or like an African djembe that big? Or?
Yeah, you could find that big.
Wow,
yeah.
Amazing.
And some, like in some, like for example in Turkey, the traditional ones, they have the tuning system outside. They have like tuning bolts outside. There's no round room, but like an edge, like a 90-degree edge. And so there's slightly different technique used on the finger snips because of the edge you can have access.
Right. It's amazing to me. I was commenting. We were talking before in the pre-telecast. about the incredible technical speed that you can get with just the fingers and the hands, rivaling that of the best snare drummer in a marching band or jazz drummer on a snare drum. You know, just amazing to me what the human fingers can do.
Yeah.
This is a particular technique that just comes from these regions.
Well, I would say it's present in many cultures, like in Indian, classical Indian music,
Right,
they
right.
do very fast fingerings.
Right.
I also know, I think in Congas too, you do the
Right. Well, now in conga drumming, we've applied those techniques,
Right.
inspired by what your culture does and other cultures, like Indian culture, to the conga drums. So which is a great thing. You know?
Yeah.
But for, I must say though, some traditionalists would say it's a conga, it's not a tumbek, man. You know? But that's a whole nother story. The main thing is the musicality of the player. You know? So fabulous. I'm going to ask now Michael a few questions. Thank you so much, Nezih. Thank you. I'm going to ask Michael a few questions. Michael, how did you come to join this group, and where are you from, and how did you get into this drumming system, culture, etc.? Are you from the culture? You know?
Well, I'm originally from Brooklyn, Syrian, Italian heritage, but my folks are very Brooklynese, so you wouldn't necessarily. I grew up Brooklyn. I didn't grow up necessarily with a lot of or any Arabic music.
Wow.
So my introduction to music, growing up in Brooklyn, was hip hop. I was very much into as a producer as a kid, and then into rock and roll, and I played guitar for many years. So after playing guitar for many years, and as you grow, your tastes grow, and you start to wonder a little bit more about your background and the music that came from it. And a friend of mine, a guitarist friend of mine, recommended that I should look into the oud. So as I did, it opened up my mind quite a bit to just the scales, or the maqam, what's how it's called in Arabic, the way you piece together phrases and everything. It's very different, and it inspired me to just kind of put away all playing the guitar and all this old things that I did, and just focus on that. And then I came across Zafer. My brother was also playing darabuka. I initially started playing oud, so I didn't really come to it through drum. First, I was playing oud for a very long time.
So you were originally a guitarist?
Originally a guitarist, yes. Electric guitarist, and then into acoustic, and that kind of led me into, after some travels in South America and everything, I decided to try to really move more acoustically. And so as I found the oud and really delved into the music, my brother joined me, and he started playing derbeke, darbuka, dumbek, whatever you like to call it. And then I'm pretty sure through my brother playing some gigs with Zafer. This is how I was introduced to Zafer. And Zafer was one of my first oud teachers. So through that, we started playing together for a while after some lessons, and then, we just started, we kind of practiced every weekend.
I'm curious, the Syrian side of your family, they must have been happy and thrilled. They said, "Oh, you finally got back to your
Yes.
roots." You know?
Well, a quick interesting story. I just discovered that my elderly cousin, who my mother went to visit, has an oud, a heritage oud from my family from the 1950s, 40s maybe. And so now I am tasked with driving down to Florida to retrieve this oud because it's too delicate to put on the plane. I'm trying to have Zafer to come with me. So
wow, there's a documentary in the making for that.
It may be, yeah. Maybe we'll get a filmmaker in the backseat.
Well, you can always just start documenting on smartphones, etc., and put it together later.
Right, we're all in control.
I would love to, see that documentary come, going.
Yeah, we should definitely kind of document that journey, and with the instruments, and then bringing them back to life and playing them. And now we're playing as a drum quartet. Now I also play. I have a band on the side, and so I've just been really absorbed in this kind of music ever since.
Now, are you fluent in the language spoken?
Oh no, I'm not. It was not passed on to my mother, which was really common back then, to sort of anglicize.
Right, exactly.
My Syrian family came during the Ottoman Empire, so they came from Ottoman Syria, and it was really important back then to acclimate and, you know,
And you said the other half of you is what, Sicilian?
South Italian body and Calabria.
Well, there's a lot of similarities in the music.
Very much. I'm glad you, and the tarantella, some of the grooves in this, and you know, I think Zafer told me, correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, the soundtrack to The Godfather, didn't you say, somebody was telling me that Feruz also sang this song.
Oh, yeah.
So there's actually even musical tradition that crosses, food tradition that crosses Latin and Sicily. Much of the language is of Arabic origin.
Right.
So yeah, it's interesting.
Like in southern Spain with the flamenco tradition.
Through Andalusian, yeah, of course.
I would say we have many more things in common than differences, which is a good thing. That's why we do these things here at the Bronx Music Heritage Center. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for your talent and for sharing with us. So we have the other member of the quartet here, Philip Mayer, and your background is really fascinating because you have a background in jazz drumming.
That's right.
But you're also what?
But kind of similarly. I was in my 20s when I moved to New York, and
That's when I met you.
that was when I met Zafer.
How did you meet? You saw him performing, or did you?
No, Philip called me for a gig.
I called him for a gig, yeah.
No kidding.
At the very beginning of me developing an interest in Arabic music.
Right.
So it was like a lesson 101 from Zafer at that time.
But your cultural background is what?
Well, I grew up in Miami, Florida. I mean, both sides of my family have been in North America for like 4 generations. So, but back to that, I mean, we go to Scotland and Germany, you know. So I did not grow up in this tradition at all. I came to it as an adult. So bringing with me all the stuff that I had been working on in my youth with jazz drum set, and you know, that's my background in rock and roll. You know, grew up with the Beatles and Frank Zappa in the house. You know.
Well, we're all fans here of Zappa, so and he's got Arabic roots too, and Sicilian roots and everything.
Right.
So, in your work as a jazz drummer, have you been incorporating a lot of this rhythmic vocabulary when you play, like when you do solos or just accompanying one?
Yeah, there's a lot of influence going back and forth, and one big interest that I was interested in before coming to Arabic and Turkish music was Indian classical music. I went to India for a few months, and for a while I thought like, wow, this is going to be my life, and I'm going to study tabla, which I did for a while, but that was kind of a gateway to this. So I have some jazz stuff and then some Indian classical repertoire that I bring a lot to this instrument, and they all kind of benefit from, you know, from different languages, different repertoire, vocabulary, and as well as technique.
Fantastic. Well, I'd like to remind everyone that if you have any questions for these 4 Grand Masters of the music, please, in the chat, type in your questions, and we'll gladly ask them in real time. All of this is being videotaped also, so you can look at it later on if you want to review any of the things that they're sharing with us right now. Well, Sophia, I want to have you play again for us something. Could you tell us a little bit about the next piece that you're going to play?
The next piece is this rhythm that I played with the jazz sextet that I play with a dear friend of mine. His name he's a trumpeter, Maestro Sophia, and it started there with 17 beats rhythm, 17 beats, and then I was sharing it with Michael, and then we took it somewhere else.
Wow.
16 and then 23 and you would hear.
You kind of reminded me of this great musician that's no longer with us, Don Ellis. He was a great trumpet player. He had a big band, and he had studied Afro-Cuban music, Brazilian music, and East Indian music.
Oh, wow.
And also the music of Bulgaria, etc., etc. So with his big band, he explored a lot of these things that you're talking about, what we would call odd meters. different types of counts that are not normal to popular music. Most of the music we do in popular music, for those of you watching, listening right now, is in 2, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, even 6, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, like a slow blues, etc. But what he's talking about now is super complex. So maybe it's better if you play and then afterwards we talk.
Yes.
This piece, does it have a name?
Yes. That day when we were working on this, after that we went to this Yemeni restaurant, Yemen Cafe, and they have hot sauce. The name of it is hog.
Hottest sauce you'll ever have.
Hot sauce.
So it's hotter than anything Mexican.
In my
The name of
opinion.
it is hog. It's hog.
How?
Okay. All right.
Challenging piece in a challenging time.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah.
the root of reggaeton. I would love to see Cardi B spit on top of that. You know, like, man, that's fantastic. I'm sure there has been. Have you worked with any rappers at all? Like, rap in Arabic?
I performed with Sting 3 times.
Fantastic.
Here in California, this is when I first got, actually it was my first gig. When I came to the US, and there was this Algerian singer, Shabani, and they composed a song and it became a hit, Desert Rose. And in that song, they used a hookah player, and I was lucky to be the one to perform with them because it was a fun experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you, I was curious about your Palestinian background, and of course, Palestine and Israel are in the news, right? Well, they're always in the news, you know.
Yeah.
But this is kind of a sensitive question, but I'm fascinated by your background. Since you grew up in Palestine, as your birthplace, etc., that's your root culture. In terms of your interaction with the Jewish community, right? Do they have drumming systems as well in the Jewish community, or have they basically inherited your drumming, vocally systems, etc.?
So, Israel was created in 1948 by immigrants from the Arab world and immigrants from Europe.
Right.
So the Jewish immigrants who came from Syria and Iraq and Morocco and Yemen and etc. They have a Middle Eastern background.
Right.
We eat the same food. We cook. We play similar music. There's so much in common. But people who came from Europe, like Germany, Spain, France, and from other parts of the world, they adapted. They love this music too. So
right.
but it's not in the culture.
Right.
But also the place people share, like in New York, you meet people, they play amazing Arabic music, and so we share this. But that's the story, that's the similarity.
In other words, the music brings the people together.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, that's something to be said for that. Maybe that needs to be. Somebody should tell the politicians that. Nezih, I just wanted to ask you about your background culturally. Tell us a little bit about your cultural background.
Yes. So I was born in Germany, and I grew up in Germany to Turkish and Syrian parents. And I like Michael also, I grew up with Western music, rock. I was playing also guitar, also electric guitar. And at some point, I got curious about playing congas. So I get into playing congas. I studied Latin percussion a lot. And I was performing with it before I moved to the US.
And what part of Germany was this?
I was in the south, close to Switzerland, like not far from Stuttgart.
Okay.
So yeah, I lived there till '99, and I moved to the Netherlands.
Well, there's a big Latin music scene in the Netherlands.
Yes, and I studied there Latin percussion with some people there. And then in 2007, I moved to Philadelphia, where I lived for 5 years, and now I'm in Europe since 2012. So I came to the Middle Eastern percussion actually pretty late in my life. So I started out playing congas and bongos and timbales and.
That's great. That's
yeah.
great. So you must have known in the Netherlands of the group Nueva Manteca.
Well, yeah, I was studying with Lucas van Merwijk and
what about Martin
Vermont?
Yeah. I know all those guys very well.
I know.
And,
I was listening to their music and
Jan Hartog, may he rest in peace.
Yeah.
In case you don't know, ladies and gentlemen, we kind of get jaded here in New York City because with Afro-Cuban music kind of rules here in New York City and all forms of that music. But in the Netherlands, they actually have a conservatoire there in Rotterdam where you can get a 4-year degree in Latin American music.
That's what I
mean, I was a guest with this band, Nueva Manteca, led by this incredible pianist, Jan Hartog, and he's showing me around the university. And I go, what are they doing in that guitar class? He goes, oh, they're transcribing Arsenio Rodriguez Cuban tres solos. I laugh. These people, they're so far advanced in terms of the educational scene. So man, you came from that background.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And I went to that school. I went to Rotterdam.
Wow. So we got to call you up for some salsa gigs. That's some Latin jazz
I have
gigs.
to get my congrats.
Yeah. So, you know. Wow, that's fantastic. And now, you know, coming from my background in Cuban, Puerto Rican, Dominican music and jazz, sometimes I hear internally figures that sound like clave-based figures, and I'm sure you relate to that as well from your background in studying that music.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. In this music, is there some like a basic rhythmic tenet that we would be akin to what we would call the clave, which is
Absolutely.
the basic rhythmic
Absolutely,
rounding
yeah.
principle in those music?
Especially like in odd time signatures, you can
Right.
just refer to a clave. Like for example, if you have a 7/8, which you would count, you divide it to 3 and 4.
Right.
3, 2, 2. You just go. It's a simple clave, it's just the
Right.
subdivisions. And once you internalize it, it also becomes easy to improvise. So, and you have that for any time signatures, like in 9 it would be. And in that, if you grow up in that culture, you know, if at concerts you see the audience clapping along with it. It's just internal, it's natural.
And they're dancing in those meetings
Dancing too,
too.
yeah. You have the line dances, the folkloric ones, and you also have like individual dances for that.
I was in Turkey, I actually heard them protesting in non. You know,
Amazing.
That's how painted their blood is.
Yeah. I mean, the only reference point that I have is I've been fortunate to have done some Greek weddings.
Yeah.
And the first time I said, how are these people going to dance in 7? And I'm looking at that, they're dancing in 7.
Yeah.
It's very, you know.
If you go like to Bulgaria, Macedonia, they dance in 25/16, you know.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
They do it, actually. And also in the rhythms in 4, there's also kind of a cloud similar to the African cloud.
Right. Fantastic. Well, we have a question from someone. The person is, and put this out to anybody in the group. Fiona Hernandez asks, what do you enjoy the most about music of Egypt, Turkey, and Palestine? We should ask the Scottish gentleman over here from Florida. You know? What do you enjoy most about the music of Egypt, Turkey, and Palestine? This is Philip Mayer. I have to answer.
The melodies, the rhythm, it's just, I don't know, when I heard it was something very different, and to my ear, and I was just like, wow, what is that? So beautiful, so profound, even without knowing what the words are.
Right.
Listening to Kulthum, the great Egyptian singer, you get it's just so much passion, so much emotion and meaning, and so then you can look up the translations or stuff for what the song is about. And the rhythm, I mean, these drums for me are very exciting. I mean, I met early on just incredible musicians and drummers, so, as a drummer, there's a lot for me to go, wow, what is going on? I want to do that, and so, I go to Turkey or wherever and study and with incredible drummers, and so that's been it for me, and it's led to some of the most enriching experiences in my life.
Fantastic. Well, obviously, this is an oral tradition that's passed down. There's no notation at all. Of course, there are musicians like yourselves that can write music, etc. Are there anybody on the conservatory level in the Middle East? Are they starting to incorporate these traditions on the conservatory level to teach them in a formal way?
So, as Philip mentioned before, we have a different theory system. The Maqam system is an oral tradition where you have to learn to tell the difference between the scale by just listening.
Wow.
And the mode of the energy that scale creates. Like imagine we're sitting here and I take out the oud and play for you that maqam scale, and there's ornaments and improvisations. The way that I approach the scale that creates this mode. You know, how is there, like for example, a solo lauto before the singer does an improvisation in Cuban music,
Right.
or so, you know, similar. But maqams from the Middle East and Turkey, the whole area, the Levant, Syria, big Syria, there's so much difference between the commas, and this microtone is higher in Turkey, and this microtone is shorter in Egypt, and they approach it different. But it's also very similar because we all lived under the Ottoman Empire for 350 years almost. Even in Tunisia, you know, Tunisia, it's North Africa, but they're influenced because the Ottoman Empire was there. But today, you know, to unify the music, like because the violin came in, the accordion came in, the piano even, you know, like with the jazz sextet, I was telling you about two rivers that I came. We tuned the piano microtone.
Wow.
Yes. We changed.
So you must drive piano tuners crazy.
Yeah.
when they show up to tune the piano and they're ready to leave, and then you go, no, it's out of tune. What do you mean it's out of tune? No, you have to tune it microphone.
Yeah. But sometimes it works, but it worked a couple of times with this band that we, you know, it's a huge, the band names River Sam. It worked when we tuned because we all played the same microtones.
Right.
But then also this coming the microtonal system and the maqam system coming from Sufism and from folk music. It's all connected in a way.
Yes, indeed. It is all connected. We are one family, which is great. I just wanted to remind everyone, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, type them in. These great masters of these traditions are here and they're ready to answer your questions. You have an instrument there, Philip, that I've always been fascinated by, that has jingles on it, the rick. Tell us a little bit about it, and maybe you can play a little solo on it, and then obviously with the group.
Sure. Well, this is, as Zafer mentioned earlier, it's a classic instrument from all over the Middle East, from North Africa through the Middle East and into Turkey. Originally, it was made with fish skin.
So I meant to ask you, what kind of fish?
Zafer.
That actually fish, I heard stories about that fish. Stingray, but
What's the name of the fish?
Stingray.
Oh, stingray! Wow!
And it's extinct now. You can't find the same because they used it so much. It's hard to get by. As Johnny, we have a friend Johnny from us. He's a Rick doctor. We call him the Rick doctor.
Dr. Rick.
Anything happens to you, Rick, or something, you go to Johnny and he fixed it. And yeah, it's amazing that you can't find that skin.
Wow.
But you know, I feel bad for the fish too, I guess.
One thing that's really fun when I go see Johnny Farrash play Rick, he's I don't think I've ever seen him play. Well, he has plastic. Yeah, but he plays very classic fish skin, beautiful instruments. And one reason why we use synthetic skins a lot of times is because when it's humid, the moisture lowers the tension of the drum head. So in order to tune the drum up, which it should be tuned pretty high, right? They'll bring an electric heating pad and two tambourines, two ricks. So while he's playing one song, one is cooking on the heater to dry the head to tune it, and then sometimes even mid-song they'll just switch out the drum, put down the one that's been soaking up the humidity, and get the drum that's sounding.
I could just see a comedy routine on Saturday Night Live. I'm waiting for him to tune up, and he's tuning, and then Sophia goes, "You're too sharp." You know, I'm flat now, you know.
So I can demonstrate it a little bit if you want.
Sure.
So there's two positions. You can play in a soft position, right? So I'm playing a low note and a high note essentially, right? And then you can also play it holding it with one hand and playing the cymbals here, the zills.
Right. It's a beautiful thing, man. Now, do you ever use glissando technique at all? Is that part of the tradition, or is it something?
No, this would be sort of the. Yeah.
I still think to it.
We use dynamics. No, it's all. We use dynamics when we play with singers, because you have to be soft and present at the same time for the singer to hear your cycle and link to you.
I got you.
You know. So yeah, soft. Yeah. Yeah. So this rhythm, it's 10/8 rhythm. He just played it.
Okay. Now, do they come in different sizes as well? I've seen bigger ones, but I don't know if that's part of the tradition. Do they come in different sizes?
Yeah.
And like, would you play, like, say in a purely folkloric contest, would there be 3 Rick players, or 2, or just 1?
Usually there's just one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, and there's a bigger one from Turkey. What's the name of the one? Not Mazhar, no. Exactly, it looks like this big, but it's a bigger one
Okay.
for Ottoman traditional music. But I don't know if they call it the same. I think I'm pretty sure it has a different name.
It's a different language.
I don't know.
Well, the Ottoman Empire, man, it looks like they were like, no, ours is bigger, you know. Ours.
No, they use both. But
Okay.
the other one is used for different
Different technique.
setup.
And it's a different technique as well?
You don't even actually play much on the
Yeah.
zeros and the G's. You hold it, they just vibrate with the. It's like this size, like a big frame drum. Or like,
Wow.
like the one like the Pandit.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe direct. No, not direct. Direct is not Uzbeki. Yeah.
Great. So can we hear something right now?
Yes, let's hear something.
And we have another question from the audience. So
Yes.
after, let's hear something with the Rick.
With the Rick and with this rhythm, just to explain to the audience and to you, the Sana'i, I'm gonna count it. We use syllables for rhythm, do and tak. So I'm gonna count from 1 to 10, and we clap on 1 and 4 and 6, 7, 8. I'm gonna demonstrate. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Boom, S, back, S, boom, back, S, boom, S, back, S, boom, back, S, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm gonna sing something.
If you can, count it in for everybody watching at home, and they can hopefully follow along too. And before we start, if you could tell us, Michael, about this drum real quick.
Sure. Well, I actually just recently got this drum. It's
It's beautiful.
frame drum. I mean, and like the darbuka, darbeki, dumbeki can go by different names. Daf, tar, bendir. Bendirs usually have like a buzzing quality. They have strings across the back.
Okay.
And you can play it. You can either play it in standing, like this. You can put some players. Probably the most common would be to play on your lap, which is kind of similar to darbuka style. But I find most comfortable because it's ambidextrous that you can do. And you could also, they're generally skinned. They also come as well in plastic. And really common for this kind of ensemble. You'll have a rick, you'll have the darbuka or two in a frame drum for like a bass sound.
That's definitely at the root of the pandereta from Puerto Rico.
And so common all across the world. Really,
Exactly,
every
yeah.
culture has a frame drum. The Irish have the bodhran. So yeah, wherever you go in the world, I think there's pretty much some kind of frame drum.
Thank you for your education. Well, this piece is in 10.
Yes.
Zafir's going to count it for you at home so that you can follow along.
Yes.
And we'll get to hear some of the beauty of the Rick featured here in this piece.
Yeah. So, yeah, so this rhythm was created for this poetry. So sometimes in Arabic music, some موشحات Andalusian music that came from Andalus.
Okay.
The rhythm follows the poetry.
Right. So in Andalusia is like the root of a
Flamenco.
part of the decima tradition
Yeah.
that we have in Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the Punto Guajiro. The decimas that we sing in Puerto Rico and the controversias. Wow, fantastic! Thank you for giving us that education and bringing these beautiful melodies. So the poet would come out and recite.
Yeah.
And would it be improvisational or would it be something that he or she would have composed beforehand?
No, composed before, and there's a rule like this poetry specifically that came from Andalus. It's written on a rhythm, linguistic rhythm that it's used in classical Arabic poetry and in classical and they will know they're known. We call them بحور الشعر, the rhythms of poetry. And there are, I think, 7 or 8. I don't remember the exact number. And they have names. And the poet will compose the poetry that fits into these rhythms.
Right.
Yeah.
So and then I could come over here. In the decima tradition, we have octosyllabic form, 10 stanzas that have to rhyme in octosyllabic form, and sometimes they have 7 syllables. In the Puerto Rican Andinados, we have 7 syllables that have. But all of this is rooted in Andalusia.
Yeah.
So beautiful to see and hear those connections readily right now. Elena, my co-artistic director here at the Bronx Music Heritage Center, has a question.
Well, actually, I have 2 questions. First, I want to go back to the frame drum. You had mentioned that there's frame drums in like every culture, which, there's Native American culture, there's Korean, Irish. But are the ones like from the Middle East, the rhythm, the traditions you guys are coming from, do you see like the sort of, not the evolution, but how they made their way, how they traveled like through the Mediterranean, through Latin America? Are there any traditions you can look at and say, oh, that definitely is like related to our tradition, maybe from Mexico or Puerto Rico? Are there ones that are closely related to the?
Yeah, I think it's hard to really trace which, I guess, if I'm understanding the question, probably who started the frame drum, but they definitely, like most instruments, have traveled and have evolved. Like the oud turned into the guitar. So you can see the evolution of that kind of instrument. I'm sorry, I may be speaking that. But yeah, so I mean, the Native American tradition, of course, is quite separate. So perhaps it's the simplicity of the drum, the goblet drum. Like this is much more difficult of an instrument to make, right? With this, you just need a round piece of wood and stretch skin. So I think because of the simplicity is why it's so ubiquitous.
I have also an answer to that. So what I've read is that the frame drum comes traveling around the world in 2 different ways. One being like from a shamanistic tradition, in Central Asia, Siberia, and then through the Bering Sea, just the way that humans migrated to the Americas through the Bering Sea and Alaska. I think that's probably the way the shamanistic way tradition has moved, like the Native Americans here having the ritual drums. And then through the Ottoman Empire, of course, and the name Bendir, the Moroccan name, it's also used in Turkey and other countries, but I think it relates strongly to Bendir. So I believe it has gone through Spain, Portugal, to the US. Just like other instruments as well, like we have the dawul, and it's basically the same as the zabumba from Brazil. So it's the same principle, and I think even more instruments have used it.
Which is definitely like, just mentioned, Nezih mentioned an instrument called the zabumba, which is in northeastern Brazil. It's a thin bass drum. There's a mallet in one hand and kind of wand in the other hand, or sometimes just your bare hand. And in that music that it's used in, Baon in northeastern Brazil. Very Arabic in terms of the scales, that they use. So it's again, I always love to see these connections, and with masters like yourselves making those connections. Thank you so much. And then the second question that Elena had.
Well, because you were talking about sort of the origin of the frame drum. Isn't historically I always read that a lot of women, and like historically, a lot of women traditions, female traditions, in Phoenicia and other places, right? And it comes on, the drum was used sort of like in the harvest, right? To sort of, what do you call it when you take the seeds,
Sifting?
you're sifting the seeds,
Yeah.
right? They kind of come from like that tool. So, are there any current contemporary female traditions that maybe because I know that when we talk to the woman Catarina who plays the Portuguese drum, there's a tradition in Portugal where just women play like these certain drum and certain rhythms. Is there anything like that in the Middle East where women might have a tradition that they only play?
Absolutely. In Morocco, you hear a lot about shekhat in Morocco, and the shekhat, it's a group of women musicians that they go into weddings and cafes where they make the party, like it's a 6/8 rhythm the whole night, and it goes to 5 and 7, sometimes other meters, but it's a group of women that they're the musician in the wedding. And sometimes because there's separation, men and women, so the women will play for the women party and the men will play for the men party. But I've seen where men played for women and men, and women played for mixed crowd.
Wow. What about like in Kuwait? I've seen in Kuwait, like mostly it's women group drummers that play for the group play, right? Is that
They're
true?
also in the Gulf.
In the Gulf region?
In the Gulf region, it's there, but also mostly men who drum for the men. Yeah, mostly men. But there's some circuits where the women play for the woman party,
Right.
Because they don't want to mix. Some people they don't want to mix, and also woman party. I think women they enjoy themselves better without the men sometimes. Really, because they have a different atmosphere, different party. They're okay without it.
Getting points at
Here's an excellent question. Here's an excellent question from one of the people that's doing tech for us right now, the great Jorge Vasquez, who himself is a fabulous practitioner of the bomba and plena tradition of Puerto Rico. Is there a person in the States that makes these type of drums, or do you basically buy them at a music store? I've seen Doumbeks commercially available in music stores, but some of these other drums, like the rig, etc., I'm assuming that you have to seek out artesanos, artisans that make these drums. Is there one particular person, or are there several master drum makers?
I know a few who make darbukas and frame drums, but not. I know like two.
Cooperman.
Oh, the company, yeah. Of
The
course,
company.
But they don't make darbuka.
They don't make their frame drum company Cooperman in Maine. They really make good frame drum and good rigs for America. They're like the best quality, I think, frame drum they make in the West Coast, the East Coast, sorry.
Right.
New York. In the East Coast, and they use good material, and it's different than from the commercial Remo and the stuff you find in the stores. It's a better quality.
Right. The
And
remote.
then you can buy from abroad, where from Greece,
Like this one's from Egypt,
Yeah.
which is where you'll find Egypt is very popular in Turkey too, where maybe it's more popular to make clay versions.
Yeah.
So basically, if you wanted to get really a primo, high quality instrument, like if you wanted to get maybe an entry level instrument just as a student, you might go to a commercial source like the Remo Ski Drum Company, and then maybe this company Cooperman.
Cooperman,
But if you
This one is Garwata Fan, that's from Egypt.
So to get like a really professional, high quality instrument, you get it imported.
For the most part, yeah. I know there's some local, we all know Heather. I know
Yeah,
Heather is one,
yeah.
I know only one American, woman who makes clay darbukas. They do slightly vary in perhaps dimension, but it's very close and they sound great. But other than her, I don't know.
No, I don't know.
There's Quentin, he makes them out of something.
Yeah, and
Oh,
then
that's
there's
a-
Quentin who makes them out of like steel. They're very rustic looking, but very durable. But they vary slightly, I think, from the traditional darbuka.
And this instrument that you're holding in your hand, is it a synthetic material or is it clay?
This is mother of pearl inlay.
Okay.
So it's an aluminum cast, which unfortunately, if you could see right here, because I chipped, which is another reason why these are so great. They're so solid. The one that Philip has is clay. So we're very happy he took the risk to bring this out today. But if those things crack, it's a wrap, right? This one,
If you drop it, or
yeah. If you drop that, it's
Look at the beauty.
this one is a very.
We all want one once we saw
And we just
one.
told and that
like
was many
Philip.
years, right?
Well, maybe we'll post a picture of you holding it like that. You'll be the poster child for it, you know, like
So beautiful.
And this one I got from an artisan in Greece, in Athens.
What's his name? Like this?
The company is Descarga.
Oh, it's the same.
Descarga.
right.
Percussion.
So we were talking about before, which is
Yeah.
strings. So I mean, descarga for us in Cuban music, Cuban-based music means the word literally in Spanish means to unload, but when we to discharge, but when we use it in a musical sense, it means a jam session. So is the person now? I think maybe I asked you, but the person. Why did he call it descarga? Is he a fan of Cuban music? Or
He's Greek and he got his start in drum building in Cuba. He lived in Cuba for many years.
Oh,
And you'll
okay.
see he calls it Descarga Percussion by El Greco because in Cuba they called him El Greco.
Right. Well, that's like Martin Cohen who's from the Bronx.
Yeah.
Who was making drums in New Jersey, Cuban percussion in New Jersey, and now they make in Taiwan or Thailand. So there you go. So cross-culturalism just in the manufacturing of the instruments. But in the hands of you guys, the instruments sound so beautiful no matter who makes them or where they come from. And of course, the musicians bring out the soul. So we have another question from Fiona Hernandez. What is the most difficult part about playing the drums in this type of music? I guess from both a technical standpoint, technique standpoint, and then you have the difficulties of these. Sometimes you have these odd meters.
Yeah, I would definitely say the odd meters are a challenge, especially from the Balkan regions, from Bulgaria, Macedonia, Turkey, and some technical things like the rolls, like the long rolls, I would say are challenging.
Could you demonstrate real quick that sweeping technique?
It's like basically there's different ways to do it. I do it like this. It's like a triple move. Basically, it's like almost.
Right.
But some
And
people
I-
start with a different finger, so there's different ways to do it.
I
You
saw
can use
some-
4 fingers.
I saw Zafer using like a sweeping motion sometimes.
Yeah.
Can you demonstrate that for me?
Yeah, and I would say the most challenging thing is learning the vocabulary of the rhythms. Plus the meters, the odd meters, and because they also have a vocabulary ornament, how you ornament on top of the 9, how you ornament, for example, the 5 took me forever. The 5 and the 10, I was like, what? Where's the one? You know? So the vocabulary, how you deal with these.
Well, that's inspiring for you to say that you have difficulty, because that's inspiring. For a master like you can say that, then there's hope for all of us.
So the split hand that I use with both hands, and sometimes with and I use the different that I use this hand and index and ring, but Nezih uses this hand, this ring, and index.
I see.
This is
So when you
different. I move to inward.
I see.
He moves outward.
So it's more of an idiosyncratic thing.
Yeah,
So.
and for me this is new. I'm using this way just with my friends, but I play also another way which is the Egyptian way, where I use the pinky for example. But I use this way with singers and with orchestras, Arabic orchestras. But for example, these sounds. So this is with the singer. Sometimes this you hold this for half hour, the same rhythm.
Wow.
Because the singer is singing and there's so much happening on top musically. So that's different way of playing. And there's the Egyptian way and there's also the Syrian way. The Syrian way is different, more like, so they use and they use, I don't know how to do this move, but they bounce like a drumstick. They hit once and it does
The double thing?
yeah. I don't know how to do that. I don't know that move, but there's so much. You know, Tunisia, Morocco, you learn a new rhythm. Philip teach me, I learned from Philip, I learned from Nezih, I learned from Michael. There's so much you can learn from, because we all interested in this. Maybe Philip will learn something that I don't know from someone else. So if I'm smart, I can learn it from Philip, and Philip will learn from me, and etc. You know, we can share them.
What fascinates me is that Egyptian technique that you're using the pinky
Yeah,
to
pinky.
get that high-pitched snap sound.
Exactly, yes.
That if you're playing bongo or congas, you do with your forehand. You know,
Yeah.
But with that one pinky, it just it's so piercing.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, we have. There's one last question here. Which, where is it? We have. I don't know who's asked this question, but it says here, in the Caribbean, many of the musicians, if they are Cuban, Puerto Rican, Dominican, know Afro-Cuban music as their fundamental rhythmic knowledge. Is the music of Egypt similar in the Middle East? Is it the music that, no matter where you're from, mostly everyone knows and performs?
I would answer this question because
From the Middle East.
that's one, and because I know the answer. Now, in Egypt, the first Middle Eastern Arabic country to have cinema was Egypt.
Oh.
The cameras came, and you know, between Herod and Egypt, they used to come by, clothing, decor, cameras from So, because Egypt was one of the first, Egypt, and also in the 50s, before 1984, the capital, the main cities were Jerusalem, Palestine, and Egypt, Cairo, before Israel came. It's before 1948. It was, Jerusalem was a huge capital, big music scene, big for Palestine. And I mean, when I said that, because Jerusalem came under Israel in 1967, but Haifa was also, Haifa was the big city that had radios, but in 1948, Haifa was occupied by Israel. That's why all the musicians in Lebanon till today, they're Palestinian from Haifa in Syria. Many of the composers who composed for Diva, for Fairuz, they moved in 1948 from Haifa and Palestine 1948 into Lebanon and Jordan and other places to start a new life after, Then the same thing happened in Jerusalem in 1967. Including my family, my father ran away to Jordan and he came back and we stayed in Jerusalem. But some people, they left to Jordan and they never came back. They stayed in Jordan. Like his brother, they weren't allowed to come back actually because they weren't allowed to drive. So that's how, the music scene used to be very different.
So basically, Haifa was the New York of its time.
Haifa was the big capital, big city in Palestine.
So if you wanted to advance as a musician, like a lot of musicians that seek out are from Latin styles or jazz, they go, well, we gotta go to New York. If we
Yes.
to learn it or Egypt, whatever. So
No,
that's
but
how
at the time, we're talking at the 50s. Not there.
More though, no?
Egypt, but no, Haifa was a
More
big
than
city.
Egypt.
Not more than Egypt, because like many of the directors, and they went from Haifa, Lebanon, because it used to be the big Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and before Jordan even.
Right, right.
There is, it used to be big Syria, including Jordan. Then, when the war started after the English left, many people like they were disoriented.
musicians, contemporary musicians now, so that I can be aware of it and I can expand my knowledge, and also the audience, the general audience, that are experimenting using this folklore, these folklore drumming musical traditions in a modern, either acoustic jazz context or jazz rock context.
There's certainly bands or projects using the odd time singers, like very progressive, like prog rock,
Mhm.
kind of, what was that band? Doesn't come to mind.
Dream Theater.
Dream Theater, I was
Yeah.
thinking of. Even like death metal bands from Scandinavia do like crazy.
Well, they're coming from using the time signatures,
Right.
not from this tradition.
Yeah, not
Just using it in a more
Yes.
European-based tradition.
Avant-garde, right.
But there are fusion groups. I mean, but for jazz, well, there's actually a Lebanese composer who's based in Germany called Rabbi Abu Khalil, and he has made projects with jazz music with Milton Cardona on
Right.
congas and who else? Like he had like Glenn Velez, who was the percussionist, or what's the name of the bass player? Glenn Moore. Steve Swallow, that's right.
Howard Levy,
Howard Levy,
harmonica.
Yeah, great.
So he does like a lot very a progressive thing. Each album of his is different,
Right.
and it gets crazier. Every time.
Did you repeat his name again so that people can?
Rabbi Abu Khalil.
Okay. And if we Googled him,
Yeah, it's
You could find it.
RABIHABOU, and it will pop up.
great.
And one of my favorites was actually already mentioned here before, and Zafer plays in this group. It's led by Amir al-Safar, and I think it's just a beautiful and incredibly tasteful fusing of modern and contemporary jazz, as well as Middle Eastern music. And Zafer's in it. That was one of my early inspirations.
Even better.
I have one more. There's a Turkish Romani group called La Taifa, and they fuse like the Romani style of Turkey with a kind of funky fusion, little jazzy, like all time singers. Really amazing musicians.
Great.
Worth checking out.
Thank you.
So-
We,
Before we end, we just had a little dropout before. The original question was like Yanisa Soren had asked, what is being done to keep the tradition alive? Are there schools? And I think, Mike, it dropped off when you were talking about the
retreat.
camp. So
Yeah.
if you could just repeat that again.
Sure.
And then once we're done, we'll wrap up. We'll just end with a performance. So
Okay.
we'll after that.
So I was just mentioning that there is a really good retreat called the Arabic Music Retreat that's held on campus in Massachusetts. And it's for all levels, very advanced students to just beginner students. It's a great immersion in the music and the culture. Wonderful teachers. So yeah, I would recommend that. And you may find there are also retreats on the West Coast and overseas. So you could explore your options.
do they provide the instruments as well, or do you have to bring
They
them?
don't, because the instruments, you have to buy them. Yeah.
Right,
Maybe sometimes percussion, they'll provide extra percussion instruments, but if you're doing violin, oud, ney, which is the flute, you really have to.
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. I want to thank Michael Burdi, Philip Mayer, Nezih Antakli, and Maestro Zafer Tawil. The group is Jottar Quartet. Thank you for sharing your incredible knowledge with our audiences here at the Bronx Music Heritage Center. My name is Bobby Sanabria. Don't forget that Percussion Discussion occurs monthly here. If you just tuned in and missed the beginning or want to view this again, this is on a constant loop. As soon as we finish, it goes into a constant loop. So you can refer to this anytime you want. If you have any questions, you can refer, just email us, put them in the chat, and we'll forward them to these incredible musicians. Supreme thanks to Elena Martinez, my co-artistic director, Jorge Vasquez, who's manning back there all the technical things of running the Starship Enterprise back there, and Berta, Jottar, who's doing the video component. We apologize for some of the early gaps that we had in the beginning. Simply things were dropping in and out, but those of you who got to watch this are the better for it, and those of you who only got to see some of it, remember, you can see it again. Anything else, Elena? Oh, and also, oh, I'm sorry, and Miguel Maldonado, who's running sound for us as well. For the Bronx Music Heritage Center, my name is Bobby Sanabria. May your lives always be in clave. We leave you now with the sounds of Zafer Tawil and the Untitled Chapter.